Flack Talk with James Canning. The podcast with the inside scoop on journalists from San Diego and across the nation. If you're a communications pro, have a nose for news, or you're just nosy, this is the podcast for you. Now here's your host, James Canning.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Flack Talk. I'm extremely happy today. I'm really happy because I have a guest that's really influenced a big part of my career. This is the person, I talked about him in one of my early episodes. I think it was the first episode. This is the man that taught me how a newsroom works. And I'm going to tell you, young PR folks, if you don't know how a newsroom works, you're screwed. So find somebody who can tell you how a newsroom works. I had a good fortune of my boss at the time, Dave Manny, said, James, we're going to show you how a newsroom works. If you know how it works, you're going to be okay. And he said, okay. He said, so he sends me to this place, and it's the Channel 7 studio. And who do I meet? Mickey McCanham. Mickey McCanham is an assignment manager there. He's been there 30 years at WXYZ Channel 7 in Detroit. Mickey, thank you for coming to the show.
Well, I'm flattered. All the things you said about me. I just try to keep everybody on the ground and move forward.
Well, no. See, Mickey's very humble, because the reality is that he sat there for a couple hours with me and he said, "Kid, here's how it all works. You got to get to know this person. You got to get to know this person. You got to understand that the meeting's happening at this time. This is the kind of stuff we're interested in. This is the kind of stuff we're not." And it just opened my mind. And then he even said, "Now, I told you that about our station. This is how we work. They all work the same. So go figure out all that stuff from them other guys too." And I mean, it was just dude, it just changed how I do business and how I learned how to do this business. And it meant so much, man. It just did. I mean, 20-something years later, and it's great.
You learned all that stuff, then you abandoned Detroit.
Oh. yeah. Look at that. See, I took it and ran, man. I mean, that's Mickey's hit kind of a soft spot there. I really struggled when I left 7 years ago or so. It was hard, and then now he's giving me shit for it, but it's okay. But you know what, Mickey? I think at some point in my life, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna impart that wisdom. I'm gonna impart what I've learned in the big world out here in San Diego, on my fellow Detroiters, maybe. Oh man. So Mickey, as you know, I'm really fond of you. I think that your role in news is extremely important, and I want to get into that a little bit. But Mickey, can you give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself? Tell folks how you where you're from, how you got to be, in the news business.
Well, it's kind of, I didn't mean to get in the news business in any way, although I've always had an inquisitive mind. When I was in the fourth grade, I ran a little classroom newspaper, but I always liked information. I got into the business by accident. I was born and raised in Detroit, blue-collar neighborhood. I think we're pretty much in the same neighborhood, you and I.
Yeah.
I didn't go to college. I was supposed to start in the fall, and I have had some inferiority complex issues, so I didn't go. I was, and my parents weren't necessarily. I think my dad went to the 10th grade, and my mother went to the 8th grade, but that was their times, So it was raised to go get a job. So, right. But I morphed into eventually going to University of Detroit and studying a little bit about finance and law and stuff. And I got into commercial credit. I was doing commercial secured transactions deals because I specialized in that section of the law. Okay. And I was also singing in a bar on the weekends, in an Irish pub in our old neighborhood. And I met a fellow in there who was a reporter. He had been with the Detroit News. He left and started a local wire service, and we got to be friends. He was talking about the business, and he was struggling financially. He could not cover 24 hours a day. I knew the streets because I've been running the streets forever. I've been an inquisitive guy. I'm a Detroit history aficionado. I one of those urban explorer type guys when I was real young. But I went to work for him part time. I was doing my day job, and I used to run the streets all night, covering crime and fires and all that kind of stuff. And I knew the city like the back of my hand. And he finally went bankrupt. WWJ Radio, the news radio station here, hired him as a street reporter, and he became very famous live from the streets of Detroit guy. And they called me a week later and said, "We want you to come too." They liked my little skill set, so I said, "Well, it was great doing it for no money because they couldn't demand anything of me."
Right.
So I went. Yeah, I said, "I'll give it a year." And I went to work at WWJ on their news desk. And, a lot of the skills of knowing people, knowing the city, knowing the background, it all kind of came together. When I was a little kid, I used to chase the streets. I used to chase the fire trucks and police cars in the neighborhood because I wanted to know what was going on. And, I think when I was 8 years old, my mother bought me a police radio. And I used to, anybody in the neighborhood wanted to know what's going on, they'd ask me because I was in on it, But so I eventually, all of my skills, there's things that you study for that you want to be. And then there are things that lead you down the road to show you what you should be. And all of the different skills and talents I had came together to, put me in the position I'm in now. And I've had many opportunities to go vertical in my career, but I don't think that's how people succeed. People go too vertical. And so I've stuck with what I do. I've taught a lot of people. I've won a lot of awards. I've spoken at the universities. I've been active in the Emmys organization, the NATIS, and so I like to teach and pass things on and help people build their skill set, and then cover the news. I love covering the news.
Yeah. Why? And that's the key of it is loving what you do, and I think understanding like what you're good at, and you figure that out. You mentioned the radio thing. I want to get into that a little later. But I got to go to this because I had no idea about this for as long as I've known you. You sang in a bar? Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. I'm Irish. Part of me is Irish.
Me too.
And I was raised in a very musical home. My father is second generation or first generation America, and just Irish music was always around us as kids. And when I became a teenager. Back when I was 18 years old, God smiled down on the state of Michigan and turned the drinking age to 18. So when I was 18 years old, you could start going to bars. So I'd go to the local Irish pub and sit and listen to the music, and I played the music. We played it at home and stuff. And one day he says, I want you to get up on the stage with these guys and sing and perform and stuff. So I did that for a few years. It was great fun. I played all around town, and you know where the Tipperary is, or was, I should say, not far from your house there.
No.
And so I did that, and I had an Irish radio show. I just, it's just one of those things that, and I met a lot of people, and I just got, eventually I got tired of, I loved the music, but I got tired of Friday night, Saturday night, looking out and seeing the same people in the same seats, talking about seeing stupid stuff, and so much in the world going on that they're missing. And I'm not judging, but it's just, I thought I spent my time there. I experienced it. I loved it. I still wish I could play some music and go back, and it served its time.
Yeah. No, that's cool though, man. That's a great story. I knew you knew the Tipperary, but like I did not know the whole thing about the singing. Like that's pretty cool. That is cool. And
yeah.
I mean, my grandfather played in Irish bands. We're Irish too, and he played the accordion and he played the organ. And so he would
squeeze box.
Yeah, squeeze box.
Squeeze box. Wasn't an accordion, it was a squeeze box.
Yeah,
come on,
Joe. Sorry, Mickey. Sorry. So that the background on how you got in news was great, but let's talk a little bit about what you do as a assignment manager. As I mentioned earlier, like I've come over my 20 years and frankly, like I said, it started with getting to know you, that your role in the newsroom is one of the most vital, if not the most vital. I mean, people see folks on television, they see those faces, they see them talking into, their homes, things like that. But you're the one who kind of decides what exactly is going to end up on the news, because you're the gatekeepers. Can you talk to us a little bit about, especially for, the young journalists, the young PR people out there, what is the assignment manager role, and how have you made it your own over the years?
So when James Cannon came and sat down next to me, one of many who've come and sat and spent some time, I can just take it down to some very simple things. I am a hunter and gatherer of news. It's my job to know what's important today, what's happening in the world today, what do people need to know today, and then also fine-tuning that to recognize who my audience is, what they need for their needs, what do they want to know, what's important to them. And so my job was to go out and source the news, still is. And I look at everything across the board, and I present that smorgasbord of opportunities, news opportunities, to a morning meeting of producers and reporters and all the newsroom staff, where together as a group, we throw everything against the wall, and whatever sticks. I mean, it's obvious to you what the important news of the day is. We go off into tangents and all that stuff. And as the assignment manager running that meeting, the job is always to take all that back, stop those conversations, and recenter on what's news today. And at that point, you implement your news plan. You're the air traffic controller. You're the coming and going of everybody. And when the shit hits the fan, you're the conductor. I'm the one who shouts out real loud that the house just blew up. I've got one hand on the phone calling the helicopter to get them scrambling. I've got reporters and photographers starting to move. Logistically, I'm telling them where they need to be, who needs to be at the hospital, ER entrance, all that kind of stuff. So it's the hunter and gatherer of news. That's basic.
No, that's a great description of it. That's a great description of it. Talk to me a little bit about like that. How do you get to be able to hunt and gather the news? I mean, you said sources. Talk to me about that process. Like how have you developed sources over the years? And you don't got to give us your tricks of the trade here, Mickey, because there's other people out there that you don't want catching up to you guys at WXYZ. But what is it about? Because it's about relationships, right?
It's all about relationships, and I don't care about sharing with others. They're the competition, but they're really, in my mind, no competition, and I have to keep that foremost.
Oh, I love that. Look at that guy, man. No competition. I love it.
That's what my main competition. I work that morning show now. My main competition, I brought into the business as an intern from a hardware store out in Walled Lake. He went to Wayne State. We eventually hired him. He's a bullheaded guy. He didn't like the things that I like. And my main education to him was to tell him, you need to make these phone calls and start developing relationships with people.
Yeah.
It's all about relationships. Now I can have to call somebody, and I don't have to like them, but I have to have a professional relationship and be respectful of what they have to say, because it's all part of the story. People, I have a very good relationship with a fireball attorney who's nationally known, Jeff Feiger. Mm-hmm. And Jeff and I, early on, we went at it, and I told him, I said, Jeff, I don't have to take, I'm going to use that shit word again, but you used it earlier.
Yeah.
So anyways, we have a very close relationship. I mean, I can call him about anything. When Dr. Jack was helping people to the next world, I was usually the first guy who called his office, because my relationship with the morgue would call me right away and tell me what was going on, where it was going on, and I'd be the one to call Jeff's office, because legally he couldn't know beforehand what was going on. So I would never ask that question. It's attorney stuff. But it's all about relationships. And what I do also is I'm a voracious reader and gatherer of information. I read everything. I mean, my morning routine is to, I read newspapers, and especially now with the plethora of social media, I follow just tons of stuff. So I'm constantly churning all of that because, especially now in the world with social media, things are happening even faster now. And there's just information out there. There's information everywhere. So I gather it all together, and you have to hone your news instincts to know what's news, what's not news, and you just pass that on to the producers and reporters, and the real news that's going to go on the air bubbles up to the top, and it's just. I had a reading problem early in grade school, and my parents, who were not educated people, took me to a reading specialist, and all of a sudden I became a voracious reader, and it served me well. And when I talk about all the tools in the toolbox, that was happenstance. You don't think about it until later, but that's really important part, is absorbing information, and then also reading something, but playing off of that, thinking the what ifs. Why is this happening? What if? What's the story behind it? And so it's an intuitive situation. There's discernment of what's news. There's intuition of what is really going on. Because usually, I shouldn't say usually, but many, many times, a lot of the things that are presented to you are presented through the filter of a PR person. And the PR person doesn't necessarily give you the truth. They give you a spin, which they're paid to do, which is no problem. I have no problem with that. But my role is to, you tell me one thing, then I'm going to ask you straight up. Here's what I know. How are you going to respond to it? And at that point, you got to respond to it. And that's what we talked about, the difference between crisis communication and public relations.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Just for the record, though, folks, I always tell the truth. And I do. Maybe I don't tell you everything, but I tell you the truth.
No, you've been straight up.
I know. I'm just messing
around. But you know what I'm talking about.
No, I do.
People who are simply, gaslight you. I mean, and that's a very popular term now.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about that. Like, I mean, I think that description of what it takes and how you get your sources. You've been in this business a long time. You talked about, obviously the social media world has sped up kind of how information you're getting it and how you have to take it in. What are a couple things that have, in your role and in the news business in your mind, that have changed over the last 30 years? But then what are some things that maybe they're always going to be and they've stayed the same?
What has stayed the same is the fact that news is news. Information is news, and the sources of news have changed. It's the sources of news and the presentation of news that has changed. Stuff happens in our world, that's news. Stuff will always happen in our world will always be news. But what has happened now is that there's been an evolution of how we tolerate information. It used to be that, news organizations, you talk about print was originally, that was all started up and owned usually by rich people who wanted simply to put their point of view out, and even today, the two main newspapers in Detroit, you got a liberal newspaper, you got a conservative newspaper, and that was the aim of the originators of those papers, and it still is that way today. But the balance has gone off the deep end. Plain and simple, news organizations have taken a side. They've you look at the difference between Fox News and MSNBC, night and day, right. And they have they wear it on their sleeve now. It's no longer trying to be objective, trying to be fair. It's simply daggers. The fangs are out, and and people tend to go to those organizations depending upon what their beliefs and feelings are, and so trying to play it still down the middle of the road, and do that on television. I mean, we have social media is huge for us, but trying to do it on TV, you're still trying to get the eyeballs,
Yeah.
I used to do little lunchtime seminars for PR firms, and I'd start out by dumping out my briefcase full of clickers from home, and I'd say, "This is what drives the news. If what you're seeing you don't like on my channel, you're going to hit the clicker. You don't have to get out of the chair like when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But you hit the clicker and change channels, So time has become the issue. You got to get your story out quick, and that has become the demon of the business also, because people simply just don't dig deep enough to find real facts.
Yeah. No, Mickey, I appreciate that. I think that's a great perspective. You said a lot of good things there, but there's something that, like, as soon as you said it, then you said it again, it made me like really smile. And I want to clarify for some of our folks who maybe aren't from the Midwest, maybe you've never heard this terminology before, but clicker. That's the remote control for your TV. In my household, we call it the clicker, because you click it on, click it off, click the channel, click it. I don't know how many households say that, but I feel like it's a total Midwestern thing. I love it because that's where I'm from, but it's great. I love that you said it.
and the click has become an important word in social media.
That's very true. That is very true.
Clickbait. That's how we measure, the content of who's watching you.
Yeah.
It's clicks. How many clicks? Views. How many views do we get today? It's all clicks.
Yeah.
So it's all, on TV, it's just how many eyeballs can we get today? And it's the same thing, and it's driven by a little mechanical device that gets you there.
That's a great, yes, you brought it full circle there. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about it like that. So, Mickey, like, one of the things that you talked about was like the sourcing, right? You got to call people, you got to interact with people. You got to have people that you go to when you hear something. So I'll never forget, there was this one time, I was at home in bed. I used to have to get in the office at like 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 or so, 6 o'clock usually, by 6 o'clock. But I got this call like really early in the morning one time. I was working for the city of Detroit, and I was still in bed at that moment. And Mickey called me, and he says, Canning, what do you got to say? Your boss, not my big boss, but my immediate boss, he's in jail and was arrested overnight for a dispute at home. But, like when you're making that call to somebody at like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, waking them up. If I remember,
was that Matt?
I wasn't going to invoke the name, but yes, because I want him to be. I want him to be able to move on too. But like, and you're like, what's going? Like you're calling somebody at 4 in the morning, and you're like, what is it? Like, what's going through your head when you're making a call like that? Like you've heard this piece of news, you heard it, you probably heard it on the scanner. Right? I mean, I don't know. Like, tell me about like that process for you. Like when you're trying to like confirm something, especially like in an early hour or late hour or stuff like that. I mean,
I'll tell you how I found out.
Yeah. Okay.
I have many, many, many weird disciplines in what I do. Mm-hmm. And one of the disciplines I have nowadays, I sit down at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and because I'm getting old, I can't sleep anymore. That kind of thing. Anyways, one of the things I do is I go to the websites of all the county jails, and now everybody's it's all a database. So like Oakland County, I click on Oakland County, and it's got 3 different things. It can tell me the whole population of the jail. It can tell me how many people have been released in the last 72 hours and how many people have been arrested.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm doing something else, I click through it, and if a name jumps out, it jumps out.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that name, I immediately thought, oh my God, here we go. Here starts the circus. Not a big circus, but enough of a circus.
It was a circus, man. So, it was enough of a circus for that day, at least.
So I'm thinking to myself, I need to get this confirmed before anybody else, because that's my job first.
Right.
And give it to the producers, and that whole thing in any news show, the top of the show, where you can either do your regular start with all the fancy music and all that kind of stuff, and just the titter-totter between the anchors and all that stuff. But when you can start it with the timpani, rolling thunder, and that big red screen saying breaking news, you got eyeballs.
Yeah.
Right? So who's the first person that's going to confirm whether his boss got busted? Because it's probably going like wildfire through the office.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It wasn't,
And
though.
who else am I going to call but my friend James?
Yeah.
Whom I have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And you know what? If I didn't call you, you would call me later in the day and say, well, why didn't you just call me?
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. I would have. Yeah.
So you know, I mean, you got that job, big fancy job, the 3-hour lunches and cocktails after work and all that. But there's part of it is you got to wake up when it's time to wake up.
Right. Right. No, you're right, man. Like, you are right. I will tell you this, though. You actually broke the news to me. I didn't know at that point.
Well, I love that, too.
You did. You broke the news to me, and I'm like, I think I kind of know what I generally say when somebody calls me with some stuff I don't know. And I was just like, all right, I need to call you back. Let me make a couple calls. And then, like, I'll never forget, I called. My first call was to the police department, and there's a gentleman that now is a city council member that worked in the police department.
Used to work with us.
Yeah, I know he did, and then he worked with me.
I trained him.
Yeah,
he was one of my interns. I trained him. Yeah,
and then he worked with me like that, and I called him, and he knew. He was like, "Yep, I was about to call you," and because he got a call from somebody, and then I called the chief of staff. And then, like,
that was after Manny left, right?
That was after Manny left, and it was like, I was just, they were like, get in the office, and I got in the office, and we used to have these 3 televisions. We were trying to be set up like a newsroom because Manny was a newsroom guy, so we had 3 televisions. We had VCRs recording the TV shows, all this kind of stuff, and I'm just watching, and then there's a mugshot on TV eventually. Like, I think by the afternoon show there was mugshots. It was unfortunate. It was a very unfortunate situation, but that's, folks, and I think that's sometimes what the younger generation of PR people or news people don't get is, like, you're kind of, and you're hearing it from Mickey, like, you got to be hungry one way or the other. Like, and he was hungry to figure that out, and then I was hungry to figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? And
I still get excited listening to you tell the story.
I actually still get excited telling the story, man.
Let me tell you another story like that.
Okay, yeah.
One
please.
morning about 4:30 in the morning, Dave Manny, your boss who brought you over to the mayor's office, calls me proactively, saying, because the Free Press had a headline about the mayor and the mayor's congresswoman mother.
Okay.
And some scandalous stuff about the bridge crossing, all that bridge crossing stuff. Yeah. And he was going to get out in front of it, so he called me and says, I bet you want to talk to somebody today, the mayor. And I said, Dave, I really don't care about that. He's like, whoa. He says, what do you mean you don't care about that? And I say, well, I got something more important. He says, what's going on? I said, well, I was at the Christmas party for the Police Lieutenants and Sergeants Association last night, and I'm sitting with a bunch of coppers, and they handed me a piece of paper, which was a lease agreement for a big fancy Lincoln Navigator for the mayor's wife. He got real quiet. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, the mayor's office can spend up to $20,000 on anything. Once it goes $20,000 or above, they have to go through the council. I said, but he's got this lease agreement, I think it was like 2 years, for $19,999. And the fleet guys at the police department have to handle that. So I got it, and he got real quiet. So all of a sudden, City Hall starts buzzing. They start ducking cover. In fact, James called me back and says, you got to understand, that's a police vehicle, undercover vehicle. We can't talk about, they didn't go straight at it. They were trying to cover. So that Lincoln Navigator story became a huge, huge story, and that was sort of the tip of the iceberg. People would ask me, I'd be sitting with buddies at the club, and they'd say, well, what about that Navigator story? That's terrible. I said, you ain't heard nothing yet. Mm-hmm. So it's, what a great job.
Yeah, no, it's, you look, man, I think that the adrenaline that comes from it on both sides, right? You got some news that you're trying to break, and then I got some stuff I got to respond to. I mean, that's really for me what gets into it. That story you tell about the Navigator. I had just gotten there. I think I had not been there that long. Like because I think James was at the police department at that point, and
he was,
and I came to fill James's role. Like that was how I got there, and what I remember about the early days when I started working with the mayor was like I was actually the guy who got to not have to deal with all the shit that happens when someone's in political office. Like Manny, Huey, some of those other guys, they got to deal with all that stuff. And I was like the good news guy. I had to go figure out how to go tell the good news. What's going on in our department? What are we doing positively?
Exactly. Yeah,
and then eventually I got to the point where I had to deal with all the shit. But, I didn't start that way.
In fact, Howard Huey, the day that Navigator story came out, our investigative reporter went down to City Hall, and Howard Huey was literally playing nose tackle, to keep us from going down the hall towards the records department. It was great.
Can we talk about? Okay, so you said you're investigative reporter. I think we both know. I think I know who you're talking about. We're talking about Mr.
Steve.
Wilson, right? Yeah,
Steve Wilson. Yeah.
This guy, folks, like, and maybe I'll put some stuff in the show notes here about this guy. Like, he was dogged. And he had great sources. He, like, one time followed the mayor onto a plane. Like, so we think about all the regulations that we have now on planes and, your travel and things like that. So this is like 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And it's like maybe 5, I don't know. And Steve got on the same exact flight, had a source at the airline, and was on the flight
camera.
With the camera. It was crazy, man. Like the things, like the doggedness in which, and then the phone calls. Like I got so many calls from Steve, and then and I don't know if he's still there. I think he is, right?
Producer.
Steve. No, I know
Steve retired.
I know Steve retired, but the guy that was his producer went on to kind of be the next investigative guy for a little while.
Ross Jones. Ross is still there.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. I mean that's the thing. And Ross, I'm gonna tell you, I always thought Ross sounded exactly like Steve. Ross would call and it'd be like, is this Ross or Steve? Because they kind of had the same voice. I don't know. He was like picking up the Steve voice when he'd call with some kind of tip that he had or something like that. Oh man. Well, so we've talked about a couple of crazy stories that you and I have had to deal with together, but like, are there any others or weird pitches or anything else that like you came across throughout your career, like something that was just bizarre? It could be something that was a crappy pitch or
there's the pitches have not been too absurd, because I think PR people pretty much keep things under control as far as wild stuff. But the absurd stuff that I have to send people out to cover is just weird. I mean, it's the naked guy walking down the street. For instance, last year there was a guy who was keeping goats in his front yard in Detroit. There is another guy who's dressed like a cowboy, and every day he'd ride his horse down Cass Avenue. And I mean, just that's the kind of really crazy people,
Yeah.
People are people.
Yeah. When someone calls you about that kind of thing, like the goats or the guy riding the horse down the street, like, is it just bizarre so you gotta cover it, or how do you justify like I gotta go check this out or send someone to check it out?
A news show is not all hard news. Obviously, you got to have things that are gonna be a kicker at the end of the show where people can have a little giggle or whatever. And there are also the news stories that have people thinking that if you think your life is crazy, look at this, that kind of thing, But so it's all, it's all the mishmash of, news is not necessarily the hard stuff. It's also just human stuff that's going on.
Yeah. No, that's right. There, I mean, it's the shows, when you watch them, I mean, they do tug at different heartstrings or different parts of your brain, all that, while you're watching them. So, yeah. So Mickey, go ahead.
It's mostly hard. It's mostly hard news. That's why after nearly 40 years, I've got PTSD because of bad news every day. But, but you got to throw the other stuff in. You got to have fun.
you kind of you threw that in right there, and I got to bring that up. I think that look, and this isn't. I think in PR, I think in news, you sometimes you deal with a lot of difficult things. Whether it's somebody else's life or it's your life or somebody you work for, and I mean that's I think that trauma, that PTSD, that exists. Like you kind of in some ways become hardened. Oh, another dead body. Oh, another disaster. Oh, another crisis. Yep. How have over the years do you think we deal with it well enough, and have you had to adjust in how you deal with like those things that you either heard or you learned the details of, or I don't know. Like I think I'm kind of hardened to it at this point in my career, but I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, the way I feel about it is, especially in a business where you're dealing with human tragedy and disaster and things like that, early on, there's a lot of adrenaline in knowing that you're going to cover this stuff and blah 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 blah. You don't think about the human end of these things, and you tend to compartmentalize and that kind of stuff. I can remember the first time, and I'll never forget this because I've talked about it in schools often. The first time that the human part of a incident really hit me was early on. I was on the streets of Detroit working, and in the middle of the night at a house fire on Detroit's east side. One of the old houses go up like tinder, and the police are there, or the fire department's there pouring water on it, and all these people and blah blah blah. But I'm looking down the street, right in front of the house, in the middle of the street. There is a woman and probably a 10-year-old boy standing there, huddled beneath a blanket, looking at their house. Now, in that neighborhood, that's all they own. That's all they've ever owned. That's all they know. And there's nowhere else to go. And that really struck me. And then when my son was born, things struck me even more. But it's, if you have any love in your heart, if you know anything about emotions, in our job, at the end of the day, especially when you're a fix-it person, how can I fix that? If something's going wrong, how can I fix it? You look at all these tragedies and you drive home and you look at it and you think, some of these things there's no answer for. And that's pretty, you think, why is this happening? It's the depravity of our world is what it comes down to. But you take in all these images. I can give you story after story. I can tell you about, just stuff that even today get me upset because it's things that in our business we only skim the surface. Or it's like a police officer who's out there taking all the abuse that they take nowadays. It's a give and take there. There's two sides to that story, but we do nothing to train those people. We bring them on the job. They get 3 months of academy. It takes 2 years to become a cosmetician in Michigan. Yet only 3 months to become a police officer with all the complexity of that. We do nothing to give them the tools emotionally or physically to deal with all that. And so, that's just one of those. I mean, I could go on and on about all that.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that, folks, I think knowing, what you see and what it is, I mean, I think there's, your point about compartmentalizing, I call it hardening to it, but it's a compartmentalizing of the things you see and what is really in, there are things that are very important in our world, that family that you talked about huddled under that blanket, I mean, to even know what they're thinking and you can only imagine. And I think that's, I think that's why a lot of people get into news. And that's why that story is that all of our stories, most of our stories, I'll say 99%, is we see that and then we turn around, get in our car and drive away from it. And that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
We've done nothing really to help them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the compartmentalizing, the more you do it, you start to lose, the compartments fill up, pigeonholes fill up, and you lose capacity for it.
Yeah, no, you do. Well, Mickey, I appreciate you sharing that and kind of going down that little tangent there with me about the PTSD, mental health kind of stuff, because I think that in this business it's real, and as society changes, we have to deal with it. We'll probably put some information in there about how folks can deal with it if they have any kind of they're dealing with something, struggling with something that they've seen or dealt with. We'll put that in the show notes. Mickey, I want to, before we get to the breaking news around here, I want to ask you one other question. We talked a lot about your career. We've talked a lot about, your passion. We've shared some old stories here. But when you're not in the newsroom, when you're not on your cycle there of getting ready for the day, can you talk to us a little bit about some of your hobbies? I mean, over the years, I recall, and I don't know if this is still the case, right? But that you had some very interesting kind of hobbies of things, like you collected Detroit artifacts. I think you had for some reason I felt like you had a badge collection from law enforcement badges, and then police radios. I'll never forget, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong. There was a point where you said, Canning, I got a police radio in my bedroom and I sleep with it, or something like that. So can you talk to me a little bit about your hobbies? What do you do to kind of unwind from that? And I know some of it kind of crosses over with your job a little bit, kind of like mine, I think. But talk to me about that.
I love Detroit history. Detroit's been here for over 300 years, and the layers of eras and generations. We don't think at all about all of the different things that developed the town and eventually the people. Why are we the way we are? And it's all of the history that goes with that. And I love the people history. And when I told you when I was 8 years old, I got my police radio riding around on my bike. But when I got a car, I was downtown Detroit one day, and they had just torn down a building on Griswold, and on the side of the building that abutted it, there's a very faded painting sign talking about a carriage factory. And I thought, what in the hell is that? And I went to the local library, and that opened me up to, there were many, many other things in the town that built that town that we don't even think of. So I had to love it. And I started to explore the town. I remember one time taking the car, I was just a young guy, over to the east side by Elmwood Cemetery, because Elmwood Cemetery is built in the 1860s. I want to go there and see some things. And as I'm driving there's a lot of empty land. It used to be a neighborhood. The brick streets were still there, and all of the trees and landscaping. It's as if they came and plucked all of the buildings out and all of the sidewalks and left the trees and the bushes. And the way my brain works is I'm always thinking about, what was that like? What was that like? And I had a very strange experience, because before I went into the gate of the cemetery, I stopped on that little brick street there, and I got out of the car, and it was kind of quiet, and there were some pheasants running around, and I could hear the sound of kids laughing and playing, like playing in the street.
Yeah.
I could hear the slamming of a wooden back door as kids are running in and out of the house, and it freaked me out. And it just, the way the mind works, it takes you other place. But I've always loved Detroit history, and that morphed into more and more things, and the scanners got more technical, and I've always slept with one until a couple of years ago when the therapist says you're only going to do this 8 hours a day now. But when my wife and I were dating 40 years ago, we'd have dinner in Greektown, be driving home, she'd hear something on the car scanner and make me go to take her to the fire.
Wow. She was a ride or die, man. She was in it.
Oh,
she
man,
was take me.
She still is. Every once in a while, she'll say, "Let's go out and chase some flares." I say, "You know what? I'm not going back down in there." But I mean, that's just one aspect. I do a lot of different things that a news person probably wouldn't do.
You're right.
I am not your bleeding heart liberal. I am a very conservative person, which means that I love to hunt and fish. I don't do so much of it anymore because I'm older. But I have been a competitive shooter since I was a little kid, shotgun. And I live right in the middle of a forest here, and I've got gun clubs around me. So I do a lot of shooting, and competitively, it helps blow off some steam at the end of the day, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I do a lot of different things. I don't sit on the couch. I don't sit and watch TV. If I'm in the car, I'm a podcast guy. This Flack thing that I started to hear and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, Mickey, well, this is great. I'd love to close out this show with a little bit of what I call the breaking news round. It's like do breaking news, and really what this is like I've adapted this from the Actor Studio. These questions, there's like about 10 questions. They're kind of a quick answer. Like, what do you think? Just to kind of get even a little deeper into your mind a little bit here. So,
good luck.
You get good luck. Yeah. All right. Mickey, what is your favorite word?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. All right. What's your least
Perseverance, favorite? It's gotten me through things that could have ended me.
That's deep, man.
Seriously.
That's really deep.
No, but I mean, it's truth.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. What's your least favorite word then?
Whatever.
Whatever. That's your least favorite word?
Yeah. I mean, you have an intelligent conversation with, and then the person gets up and says, whatever. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Whatever? It's not whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
True expressions of the heart, raw emotion, keeping it real. At the end of the day, things are real, and it's reality. And I when somebody can come out of their shell and tell you the way they really feel, and you see the emotion of that hits me.
That's good. That's good. What turns you off?
Bigotry and racism. I think that is at the very root of it, just total ignorance and not taking the time to learn about things and people, and it's the root of everything that's going on in our world right now.
Yeah. Mickey, what's your favorite curse word?
Well, here we go. Now you're not going to beep the shit.
No, we don't. We don't bleep anything. We let it go.
Because you said it. You said it first. There's the word shit. It's not vulgar or sexually perverse. It's versatile. You can use it many, many different ways. There was I think he was Swedish or for Norway, a stand-up comic, Ismo Lykola, and he did a whole 3 or 4 minutes on the word shit. And just as an example, I can give you shit, or I can give a shit, or I can say, James, you're a shit, or I say, James, you're the shit. So it's a great versatile word, and it's not really that offensive. People say it all the time. It's not, it doesn't degrade us.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great word.
I think that I've never heard such a great explanation. That's amazing. I love it. What sound or noise do you love?
A symphony playing Handel. George Frederick Handel, my favorite composer. I'm a big classical music guy since I was a little kid. And I could go to Orchestra Hall in Detroit and sit there and close my eyes and be in heaven, just listening to music.
Amazing. What's the sound or noise you hate?
Screeching toddlers.
Screeching toddlers.
That burning screech? And the parents are just standing there looking at them, not doing anything. You want to just slap the parents. It's like, you have a responsibility to rein in this kid, You want
to slap the parents. I love it. I love it. Oh, man. Mickey, you've been doing what you do for a long time. It's clear you love it. But if you were not the assignment manager at WXYZ in Detroit, what other profession would you like to attempt?
History teacher. Because it gives so much to give people perspective and a base for understanding other things and other people and why we are and who we are and what we can be. A history teacher. I love history.
Yeah. What profession would you not want to do?
Very simple, very simple. A PR person.
All right, come on. I need a little bit more. Why?
I couldn't do that. A long time ago, I was asked by some people in the Irish community to take a political office, and I can't do that because I just, I don't have enough in me to rein it in,
Yeah.
And it's a talent, I don't have that talent. I wouldn't take it on, and I'd be afraid to take it on because I would drive home every day thinking, what the hell? Why did what am I doing? But it has a role, and it has people who can do it and do it professionally, and I couldn't be a PR person.
I got you. Thanks for being honest about that. I like it. Mickey, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, from my perspective, heaven does exist and God exists. And I think of Matthew 25:23, which basically is our purpose on earth is to serve other people. To whom much is given, much is expected. We're here to serve. So in that Bible verse, it says, well done, you've been faithful, you've done some good things, you've earned your reward. Let's celebrate.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Mickey, this has been a wonderful, wonderful interview. It's been a great trip down memory lane. I've learned a couple things that I didn't even know about you. I'm wondering, before we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to share with our Flack Talk listeners? Any last words of advice? Anything you'd like to say?
I'm the last person on earth to come to for wisdom about anything because, we're all just regular old people and, we let our mouths get away from us. But I can just tell you that, especially in the PR business, which is what you're focusing at here, is you have so much good to do. You always got to find a way to angle what you're doing to be to serve and to do things good. If you shortchange it, if you have a crisis that you're dealing with, and instead of being a crisis counselor, you continue to be a PR person, you don't have all the tools in your toolbox. So it's and you, James, do. I mean, we've seen that, and that's a good thing. So you've done a great job of developing yourself. I've seen it since those early days, and you got to be proud of yourself.
Thank you for that, Mickey. I really appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you. It really does. Well, Mickey, that's it. This is the show, man. I really appreciate you coming on Flack Talk. Thank you so much.
So this is the end. This is what it comes to. The next voice I hear is God saying, "Okay, what do you got to say?"
No, man, you got a long time before you're gonna hit those pearly gates.
It's great talking to you. I love this.
If you liked Flack Talk and want to learn more about your favorite muckrakers and newsbreakers, please hit the subscribe button or visit flacktalk.com. New Flack Talk episodes with James Canning air every other week, wherever you get your podcasts.